Hello. Today we are going to look at one specific example on how to run a metropolis within this framework of methodology. I was in charge of Madrid metropolis some time ago. I had to do the master plan, and I had to take many decisions daily on what to do in the metropolis. There is a definition of Metropolitan management and planning, which I like a lot, given to me by a professor of Oxford many years ago. It said metropolitan planning is taking immediate decisions within a general framework of the future. No? And so that was the job of managing the metropolis, taking decisions every day, but within a framework of the future. Madrid was growing very fast for a developed metropolis. Normally it's the emerging metropolis which are growing at a pace of 5% every year, which means that the metropolis doubles every 14 years, because that 5% accumulates. In the case of Madrid, it was not so dramatic. Madrid was was growing by 50% every 20 years. The rate of growth was lower, but it was substantive. If you grow 50% in 20 years, when you have taken 2,000 years to grow up to 100, that really is not a normal growth, it's an explosion. In the case of Madrid, the growth was not so huge as in emerging cities, and the other positive element was that we had a budget to deal with that. Madrid, Spain was a developed country, and the national and the local budget was sufficient to deal with it. So we were able to produce the infrastructures necessary to approach this huge. You must realize that, we will see that later on, but that when the GDP of a country multiplies by 3, the budget of the public sector generally multiplies by 20 or by 30. The wealthier you are, the more money you have to make investments, the more scarce your economy is, your priorities is to eat tomorrow. So Madrid was in a situation we could afford to look forward to make those investments. The first thing we did was a strategic plan to see what Madrid's role in the future, in the context of the world, had to be, and through that strategic plan we decided that Madrid had to be the intercontinental platform between two continents, Europe and Latin America, and that was the role of Madrid for the next 100 years or 200 years. So we did that strategic plan, and we decided that Madrid had to be that platform between the two continents, and in a way that whenever a businessman from Germany or from Argentina had to meet, instead of meeting in Frankfurt or in Buenos Aires, they will meet in Madrid. And that will produce so many spin-off benefits for the economy of Madrid that Madrid will play that role, as London, Paris, New York do play that role globally. But Madrid had to play that role in a secondary level among two continents. And so we decided that as a kind of strategy for the future of Madrid, and then you have to see what designs, what infrastructures, what services you have to provide to be able to follow that strategic approach. And that's the structural planning. That's the physical level, and we did this structural planning. Madrid, as we have seen in other presentations, is a metropolis, and metropolises are not in a featureless plane, like Walter Christaller used to say that the city is built into a central place theory with an hexagonal structure. No, Madrid is the passage between the mountains and the plain of the Quixote of La Mancha, and it has a structure of a reticula with a main directionality and perpendicular directionalities. In this slide, you see Bogota, Cologne, Madrid, Nairobi, Tehran, and so on, are that kind of metropolis, and there are other types of metropolis, but they all have a directrix and a generatrix, which is specific of the big metropolises, and so on. So Madrid development was parallel to the Sierra, to the mountain ridge, which are west of Madrid, with a 45 degrees inclination to the north, to the north-south parallel. And the development was parallel, and we had to work within development. When you see Madrid, you see the map of Madrid, you might not realize at the beginning that there is a pattern of location of all the villages, towns, some of them 200,000 people, 160,000 people, 180,000 people. So it's not just villages, it's town. You don't see the pattern, but that pattern is parallel to the Sierra, to the ridge, and perpendicular to the ridge where the rivers from the mountains to the valleys go through. No? And you see the location of those municipalities, historical, that was being done in the medieval ages, in medieval times. So there was no rational location. There was a subconscious rationality, but not a planning rationality. And you see that those cities are 4.5 kilometers apart in a location following lines of provided by the topography and the territory. And the metropolitan planner must understand that topography, that geography, that ecology, that environmental quality to set up the mechanism. So we did set this kind of metro matrix mechanisms where every municipality has its own metropolitan digit, as we have already seen, and we were able to locate data within that reticular mechanisms that we were changing from orbital and circular heritage, which was not natural to Madrid. It was in some way imposed by engineers, mainly transport, civil engineers, out of the Otto Wagner approach to Vienna in 1912, which is not anymore acceptable because it doesn't fit the metropolis. It was a vision of orbital approach to cities, and for small cities it might work, but when you grow into a metropolis it doesn't work anymore. So we were changing the pattern of the structure of Madrid, listening to the topography and the history of Madrid. And we were able to locate, for instance, this is the population within the network of trains, the rail network. So we were able to decide which were the cities that should grow because they already have that mass public transport asset, and those that should not grow too much because that will require a car dependency, building highways and so on that we did not want to promote. We have here the location of the commercial areas. So you see some of these municipalities were already saturated, some allowed for some growth, and you can make decisions having these images out of the mental maps, which make it very clear what the decision should be. We had as well incomes, and you saw in yellow the poorer areas of the Madrid metropolis, the Madrid region, the wealthier areas, so you know where you have to make the social investments to provide accessibility to the social needs of that kind of population. So we were changing from playing dots, trying all within a pattern of orbital and radial system. We changed the structure of Madrid from playing dots to playing chess. And in chess, every one of those municipalities has a different role, and they can play that role for the best of their population. We can have the analogic map, which is as simple as a map. You can have the diagrammatic map, and you can see how the diagram allows you to make decisions on where the growth should go, depending, as I mentioned, of public, mass public transport and the possibility of providing that kind of service. You have the whole system that you present as an alternative, and you discuss that with the other agencies involved. Madrid then in the 1980s had this kind of pattern, the central with two main extensions, two wings of the structure of Madrid. In the 90s, those wings extended, and we produced the high-speed train to Sevilla. In the 2000, we created the M45 that make the junction between those two wings, avoiding the going through Madrid. We decided where the next airport of Madrid had to be in 2030. So with some time in advance, but that is necessary because that airport is the one that will provide the possibility of Madrid becoming the platform between the two continents, allowing for 150 million passengers. And then you build the infrastructures little by little within that framework. And this is Madrid 2010 with a more developed, as I mentioned, infrastructure. even if you have a diagrammatic approach to the area, you can even have a schematic approach, a scheme, a very simple frame of mind that what you are doing. And then you can develop that into a more sophisticated, and you share that with people, and people understand what the framework, and they take their own decisions, they make their own decisions within that framework. So you are not only playing within your own actual possibilities of administrative policy making. You are involving the whole metropolis, private and public sector, the governance, into that kind of approach. You see the diagrammatic approach, and you see the analogical approach of a map with the proposals of that development. We saw the need for some very basic infrastructures that will complete the network and will stabilize in the long run Madrid, and we changed the axis of development of Madrid from north-south, which was the 19th century axis, to the 45 degrees axis of a metropolitan dimension, which is the 21st century. Madrid has been growing along in centuries. From the 11th century has been growing the main commercial areas, the macro market approach, as you see in a geometric pattern, which is very interesting. This was not done on purpose, but it was part of the understanding of previous generations of the growth of Madrid, and then you select what areas have to be mainly designed. I must say that the actual municipality, the actual administrations have not yet realized the importance of those areas, and even if it was pointed out in 1996, 97, this growth has not yet taken place. You have the chess game. Every municipality knows what they have to do. If they don't want to do it, they don't do it, but that will be for the worse of their own population, because they will make investments that will not have the result expected because they are the wrong investments within the game that they have to play. You have the different levels of scales, from the metropolitan scale to the urban scale to the design scale, urban design scale, and you built up with the mayors that role and the infrastructures or the economic activities that have to take place in the municipality, following a pattern that is homogeneous on the overall. We have seen these different designs of master plans in Madrid in accordance with the mayors and the metropolitan administration, and they are all consistent and they all work well. I'm not going to go through them because we have already seen that. And all of them create this pattern that is not an imposed pattern. It is a discussed pattern with the public, among the public administrations, and with the public administrations and the private administration. And then you have to find a dialogue between the elements of that matrix, of that metropolitan dimension, the transport and the environment, the ecologies, many times conflict because they overcross, and you have to find the ways of providing priority for the environment, and if that cannot, compensatory elements that will increase the value of the environment instead of. Location of the new airport, projects with 30 years ahead. That's the minimum vision for the future of a metropolis. You have to look large, wide, and long to be able to control that metropolis. And then the reshaping of the existing airport once the next one with 450 million people will be. Metropolitan acupuncture, these are the projects. I'm afraid it is in Spanish on the side, but those are the main projects that will transform and are transforming, because many of them are already in place. There are many of them are being built. You have the whole picture of it and you dialogue. What we did in Madrid was really changing the pattern of building, of managing metropolises. There has been four main theories of metropolitan management and planning during the 20th century. You have 1912, the radial orbiter Vienna, Otto Wagner approach. Then you have in 1933, the Walter Kristaller, South Germany central place theory. But in the late 20th century, you have mainly two approaches. The archipelago approach, that was as well by Germans and Graham Sheen, an English American, which is seeing the metropolis as a set of units like islands of an archipelago and dealing with them like islands. The Metromatic says that's fine, but there is a structure that links all those islands together. There is a geological structure, and you have to see that geological structure and to link all those islands together with a common strategy. And that was 1996, the Metromatrix approach that we did in Madrid with that plan that we have talked about. Unfortunately, many of the metropolises around the world, many of the emerging metropolises are not dealing with any of those approaches. It's the Moss approach, it's the uncontrolled growth, because the administrations do not know how to handle the metropolis. That, as you see, it's easy, it's possible. We have the tools already to handle those metropolises, but those administrations, the politicians on charge or the decision makers, do not know what they are dealing with, so they do nothing. And the result is a Moss development of inorganic or very basic organic development. What are we doing? It's like Picasso. It's an analogy, no? Picasso started doing the perception, which is the map. This is the analogical map. You do the realistic portrait, no? Then you start looking at the essential elements of that project, no? The interpretation, the diagram, no? You go into abstract, and at the end you do the synthesis, which is the scheme of the metropolis, the essentials of that portrait, which is the last phase of cubism, of that research of the essentials, no? And in that case, I must remember the anecdote that when Picasso did for Gertrude Stein the portrait and presented it to her, she says, I don't look like her. And Picasso told her, you will look like her in some time. No? So really you must understand the metropolis beyond what normal people do see in the metropolis. You should be the professional that has that kind of vision of what the metropolis is asking and be able to provide that. We did that in Madrid with the different functions of the metropolitan areas with large functions. And that plan has been the core of many, many decisions for 20 years already in Madrid. And the metropolis of Madrid is in some way having a pattern of development which is consistent and that is sound for the future and sustainable for the future. Thank you very much. Next time we are going to see how you cook a metropolis, egg recipes for the metropolis, and you can download these slides from those links in the web. Thank you very much.